So we're back at Web Direction South 2010, and I'm here with Craig Mott, who's a writer and publisher who just actually gave us a fascinating presentation about how digital affects books and publishing. Now, Craig, can you tell me, it seems that digital opens a lot more opportunities for us to collaborate or influence the publishing and writing process when you actually translate it to the online space. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, traditionally, publishing was about producing these immutable artifacts where out of the system comes this printed piece that you can't touch. I mean, you can touch personally, but you can't change the origin of it. You can't change the original source of that text. And so any engagement you have with it is on this sort of personal basis, and that you can't really share that engagement with other people easily. So you have this very strong, immutable artifact that comes out of that system. But what digital lets you do, and kind of inherent in digital, is this blurring of the notion of an artifact. And so suddenly the system leading up to that creation, the finishing of a book, for example, you can inject a conversation with the readers more quickly. You can do this in traditional publishing too, but authors like Seth Godin, for example, has a very strong communication with his readership on his blog. And so as you watch him post new blog entries and kind of react to the reactions that he gets, it's kind of shaping the way he thinks about his ideas about business and marketing, things like that. And that shaping is manifest in the output in the books that he produces. So that's kind of like the leading up to the production of an artifact. And then the artifact in the digital realm exists for only, an instant, and it's this very fuzzy instant. And what happens is that as readers engage this, as you publish something digitally, and as readers go in there and they begin to engage it with comments or notes or underlining or bookmarking or dog-earing or copying, redistributing. These all become layers on top of that quote-unquote original artifact. And so the idea of a temporally stable, immutable thing disappears in the digital realm. So what happens is that over time that artifact is shifting. So it's no longer just this thing that's produced and it's unaffected by outside forces. It's constantly affected, and that's what makes it really interesting. Is because now when you engage the artifact, you're engaging it on this sort of networked community level, and people have yet to kind of build systems. Like I really think that the future of publishing, modifying publishing, are going to happen in these sort of pre and post artifact systems, and so it's really exciting to be here at like a web conference, because I think a lot of these systems and these tools are going to come out of the web, out of HTML, out of CSS, out of JavaScript. Folks like at this conference are going to be the people who can build these tools to change the way readers engage with books and how publishing happens.
So I guess one of the best examples, I think, of an artifact that can actually be then changed and evolved through time would be Wikipedia. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that as kind of like an ultimate in that space?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a really easy to swallow example. It's something we're all familiar with. Wikipedia, the entry that you're looking at is sort of the result of hundreds of iterations. And that in 5 minutes it'll be different, and people are constantly touching it, and there is no sort of finished entry. Maybe some entries become stagnant after a while, but they can always be modified, they can always be edited, they can always be changed. It's not set in stone. Anyone can go in there and touch it. And so I think that, probably the easiest way to understand how books can change too, not on the extreme level of Wikipedia necessarily, where people are editing the book, but the commenting and the highlighting and the layering and the engagement. How far do readers read? How long do they read? When do they read? All of this sort of meta information about that reading experience can kind of be pulled out digitally. And so that all affects the way someone coming in down the line, down the temporal line, thinks about or engages that artifact. It's like no longer you're just looking at a book, you're looking at a book that's read between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. and that, mostly, men in this age bracket read, and that most people stop reading it halfway through. Kind of says things about the book that you wouldn't see in just a physical form. So.
Fantastic. And what are your thoughts on the iPad? How fundamental is that to changing the way that books are digested?
Well, I mean, the iPad kind of falls into the whole tablet-y sort of computing world, right? And you can argue people have been kind of trying to build these things for a while. And the Kindle, as in terms of reading, a tablet reading experience, sort of being the device that kind of broke through to sort of mass market, at least, if not acceptance, at least cognizance. There's this awareness of it. And so I think the thing that's really fundamentally cool about these devices, and the reason why reading hasn't really taken off on the screen up until now, is that if you think about reading on a computer, the screen is sort of like distance from you. The text is kind of, at maybe a foot or two away from your face. It's very sterile. You touch the text with a mouse, which is like very not intimate. So it's kind of like this distance is really uncomfortable, I think, for humans. Also, the screens aren't optimized for reading, for long-term sort of focused reading. There's a certain sort of pixel density and typography that's necessary for that kind of traditional screens haven't brought. But when you have the iPad, suddenly, the reason why we like books is there's like this intimacy of having it there on your lap. You're touching it. You're not touching the words necessarily, but you're engaging this thing, and you're kind of like swiping and moving this physical object. And so the iPad kind of brings that experience back. There's an intimacy inherent in just holding a device like this. Even a laptop is kind of like weird, sort of mechanical. But the iPad, because there's no buttons effectively, it's just a screen. Same like Kindle, even though Kindle has buttons. It's an intimate screen reading experience. And the resolutions are a bit higher. iPad, I think, next iteration will have hopefully a Retina screen, make it even a better reading experience, typographically and sort of in terms of eye fatigue and things like that. But really, just this it's the first device, these tablet computers, where it's not used at one distance. Like you can be reading in bed and it's really close to your face, or you can be reading in the chair and it's on your knee, or you can be reading like as you're having breakfast, eating a bagel, and it's kind of at, on the other end of the table, and you can reach over and you swipe to the next page. And it's the first computer that was kind of really brought layers and different types of experience of reading to the reader. And in a way, that sort of being able to change the font size and distance makes it kind of inherently a lot more exciting from a reading perspective, just fundamentally.
And what about from an interaction perspective, or even, the ability to actually experience more than you would with a physical book? So, hyperlinking through books, or, building in some kind of interaction and being able to enjoy a bit of a richer experience within that.
Sure. I mean, it can go both ways, right? I mean, reading is kind of a deep activity, you know what I mean? I mean, deep in the sense of when you engage long-form reading, you go for a long time. It's not like Twitter, you can just go in for a second and back off, or email, you check and you leave. It's like when you're engaging long-form text, you're trying to get in there and spend a lot of time with it. So in some sense, like all of this interactivity just below the surface is it can be a nuisance. I think the Kindle in a way is kind of nice because it focuses just on reading. And in a way, all of its technological limitations of the screen kind of refresh being slow, and the device kind of being a little bit clunky kind of adds to the deepness of the reading experience. It kind of works towards it. And, Bezos will talk about this. People have told, you should make it more like the iPad. Why don't you make it more like the iPad? And he goes, no, this is for reading. And in a way, like a lot of this tech that's inherent in the Kindle is enhances the reading experience by detracting from the interactivity experience. I think media going forward, books going forward that are aware of and conscious of the interactivity element in reading that the iPad brings to it, they can be sculpted in a way that engages it genuinely. Whereas if you try to take Hemingway and graft videos on top of Hemingway, that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really add to that Hemingway experience in a genuine way. So I think it's both a blessing and a curse.
Fantastic. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I really thank you for that, Craig. Have you been enjoying Web Directions so far? What are the speakers that you think have been really inspiring you so far?
Yeah, no, it's been fantastic. Obviously, Scott Thomas, being able to hear how the Obama campaign was sort of crafted, especially for someone that grew up with the Bush presidency, kind of as you become politically aware, you're in the middle of this, and to see that kind of change enacted and see how Scott was sort of one of the the Wizard of Oz sort of guys pulling the levers behind the scenes, that really actually made that manifest in his presidency is quite inspiring. And then also James Bridle, and the way he kind of deconstructs using books as sort of this just this tool really for deconstructing the way we think about obviously time, but also artifacts, and also souvenirs, and just books as sort of, he's using books as this kind of this really interesting tool to think about how this split between digital and analog is happening, and how we experience things. I mean, he's getting down at a very granular level, philosophical level of just experience in general, and that's really cool.